All right, so this is going to be Math 2. This is Unit 9. As you can see on the top now, we're going to go over Worksheet 5, and we're going to go over numbers 5 through number 18. Okay, where it said factor each expression, and then we're going to check our answer by multiplying for the first 4. Okay, so in each one of these problems, you will notice that what we're dealing with in numbers, actually all of them, is that we're dealing with a trinomial. And the reason why I say it's a trinomial, because you can see we have 3 separate terms here. Let me zoom it in ever so slightly so you can see the problem as I work it out a little bit better as you're watching this at home. Okay, but we have 3 different terms. Each different term is separated by an addition or a subtraction symbol. That's the definition of what a trinomial is. And each trinomial, what we have is we have a leading coefficient. So we have a number leading the problem, which in this case would be a 2. Okay, so what we do in this method is we call this some people call this the AC method, but this is how we're going to factor trinomials when we have this leading number, which we call a coefficient. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to get rid of the 2. So we literally just cross it out, but then on the back side, what we do at the end is we're going to multiply it. So whatever that leading number is, cross it out, multiply it by the back number. And what that does is that creates a new trinomial for you, which is going to be x squared. Notice it's this first term without the 2, plus 3x. Okay, the 3x just stays exactly the same, minus, and then I don't have 27, I now have 27 times 2, which is 54. Okay, so that's going to be my trinomial. Now, the reason why I changed that into it is because now I just created a trinomial with no leading number. These are a lot easier to factor. Okay, so what I do is to factor this trinomial, I draw 2 parentheses. This is a plus minus trinomial, which means that my parentheses are going to be a plus and a minus. The first term in each parentheses is going to be x and x, because x times x equals out to x squared. And now what I have to do is I have to fill in these last 2 parts of each parentheses with a number. Okay, and how I do that is I take my very last number, which is 54 right here, and I'm going to make a list of the pairs of numbers that multiply to make 54. 1 times 54, 2 times 27, 3 times 18, 6 times 9. One of those pairs is my answer. Okay, and my answer is going to be which pair can I add together or subtract together to make my middle term, which is positive 3. Well, that has to be 9 and 6. Okay, so I know that none of those pairs are my answer. It's 9 and 6. But now I look here, I have a plus and I have a minus. So that means my answer is going to be plus 9 minus 6, or it's going to be plus 6 and minus 9. Which one is it? Well, which one of these becomes positive 3? Well, it has to be the plus 9 minus 6. So I know I put a plus 9 right here. I put a minus 6 right here. Okay. Now, I'm not done there, because look, if I multiplied 9 times 6, that's 54, but I have to get 27. Okay, so what I have to do now is I have to make up for the fact that I multiplied by 2. So I divide both of these numbers by 2 here. Okay, so the rule is when I divide this out, if the number does not divide, if the denominator does not divide, 2 does not divide into 9, what we do is we move it up into the front of the x. So my first parentheses is going to become 2x plus 9. Okay, then my second parentheses, because 6 divided by 2, I can divide that. I actually divide that, and my second parentheses becomes x minus 3. So there's my factored expression for that initial expression. Now, how do I know that I did it right? I do a really quick check. I multiply in my head. So I take these first terms. So what is 2x times x? It's 2x squared. Look, that works out. I take the last terms. What's 9 times 3? That's 27. So I'm pretty assured that I did it right. Okay? So now I'm going to move on to number 6. So I have t squared plus 9n. I think this is a typo right here. This obviously is supposed to be a t. Okay? And then plus 18. Sorry about that. I didn't write this, but we got it. Okay, so number 6. Well, if you notice in number 6, I do not have a leading coefficient. So since there's no leading coefficient, I could immediately go into factoring out my trinomial. So I draw two parentheses. This trinomial is a plus plus, so that means my parentheses are going to be a plus plus. Okay, I start off each parentheses with a t and a t, because t squared, t times t gives me t squared. And now to figure out which number goes in each side, at the end of each parentheses, I take my last term, which is 18, and I'm going to make a list of all the pairs of numbers that multiply to make 18. 1 times 18, 2 times 9, 6 times 3. One of those pairs is my answer for those numbers. It's which pair can be added or subtracted together to make positive 9. So it has to be 6 and 3. So I have t plus 6, t plus 3. Since there was no leading number, no leading coefficient, there's my factored form of my expression, t squared plus 9t plus 18. Okay, number 7. So you see in number 7, I have a leading coefficient. That's the number in front of the y squared. So I'm going to have to take that number, I literally cross it out, and I multiply it by the number at the end. We call that number where the 30 is the c value. When I do that, my first term is y squared. I crossed out the 7. My second term does not change. I leave it as is, plus 29y. My third term becomes negative 210 because 30 times 7 is 210. Okay, so now I have a trinomial with no leading coefficient. It's a plus minus trinomial. So I know that a plus minus trinomial will factor into a plus and a minus. Okay, my first term in each of my factors is going to be y and y. And to find out my numeral terms of my factor, I need to take my last term of my trinomial, 210, and I need to make a pair of numbers. I need to find pairs of numbers that multiply to make 210. 1 and 210, 2 and 105, 3 and 70. And by the way, if you're having trouble with this, here's what I do. I just get out a calculator and I just start dividing. So I already did 3, so then I go 210 divided by 4. Well, 4 is not a factor. 210 divided by 5, so 5 and 42. Okay? Now that's not my pair because I cannot add or subtract 5 and 42 to make 29. I'm looking for a pair. So then I go 210 divided by 6, 6 and 35. Okay? And there it is right there. I can put that pair together by adding or subtracting to make 29. So I know my factors are 6 and 35, but I have a plus and a minus. So that means it's either plus 35 and minus 6, or it's plus 6 and minus 35. Has to be plus 35 and minus 6, because that's positive 29, which is what I have as my middle term. So I put a plus 35, I put a minus 6. I'm not done, because since I had a leading coefficient, I now have to divide each of those numbers that I just found by 7, which is what I multiplied at the beginning. Okay, 7 divides into 35, so the first parentheses is easy. I turn it into y plus 5. Okay, the second parentheses, because 7 does not divide into 6, what I do is I take the 7, I get rid of it on the denominator, I move it in front of the y, so my second parentheses becomes 7y minus 6. There's my factors of 7y squared plus 29y minus 30. Let's try it out. Let's see if it works really quickly. Okay, so a real quick check is y times 7y, 7y squared? Yes, it is. Is 5 times 6 30? Yes, it is. So I kind of did a quick check to see if my answer jives. All right, number 8 here, I have no leading coefficient, so when I factor this, I could automatically go to my two parentheses. I don't have to move the number in front. There's no number. There's no leading number there. Okay, so this is a plus minus trinomial, so that means when I factor, I'm going to have a plus and a minus. Each parentheses, each one of my factors is going to start with a D. To figure out what numbers go there, I take my last number, which is 15. I don't worry about the minus sign. I'm just worried about 15. Write out the pairs of numbers that multiply to make 15. There's only 2 of them. Okay, which one of those can be added or subtracted to make 2? Well, it has to be 3 and 5. Okay, so now the question is it plus 5 and minus 3? Or is it plus 3 and minus 5? Well, it has to be plus 5 and minus 3 because that makes plus 2. Okay, and notice I have a plus 2 right there. So that means I'm going to have d plus 5 and d minus 3. Okay, well, I'm not done. No, I am done because I didn't have a number that I multiplied. So that would be number 8. Okay, moving on to number 9, 2m squared plus m minus 21. So I have my leading number of 2, so I cross it out. I multiply it by my c term, which is my term that doesn't have a variable next to it. That creates me an easier trinomial to factor. M squared plus m minus 21 times 2 is 42. Okay, now I'm going to factor this trinomial. So it is a plus minus trinomial, so that means my factors will be a plus and a minus. Okay, each factor is going to start with the variable m because m times m is m squared. And now I'm going to take my last variable here, my c value, which is 42, and I'm going to write down all the pairs of numbers that multiply to make 42. 2 and 21, 3 and 14, 7 and 6. Okay, one of those pairs is my answer. And the pair is the numbers that you add or subtract together to make positive 1. Okay, we look here, that's a positive 1 right there. It's implied that it's a 1. Well, it has to be 7 and 6. So now the question is it, I have a plus and a minus. Is it plus 7 and minus 6? Or is it minus 6 and plus 6 and minus 7? Sorry. Well, it's a positive 1. So it has to be positive 7 and minus 6 because that's positive 1. So I know I have m plus 7. I know I have m minus 6. All right, I'm not done because I multiplied by 2 at the very beginning. So now I have to divide by my leading coefficient. Okay, so when I divide it out, since 2 does not divide into 7, I just get rid of the 2 and I move it to the front. Little trick. We call this bottoms up because you move it from the bottom up to the front. So my first parentheses becomes 2m plus 7. My second parentheses actually divides out, so it becomes m minus 3. There's my factors of number 9. Okay, number 10, I have no leading coefficient, so I could go straight into factoring. I don't have to do that multiply method at the beginning. Okay, now this one, this trinomial is a minus minus. So what does a minus minus factor into? Well, it factors into a plus and a minus. Okay, I know that we made a cheat sheet earlier in the week. Okay, the variable at the beginning of each factor is going to be n times n is n squared. Now I'm going to take my last value, my c value, and I'm going to write all the pairs of numbers that multiply to make 40. Keeping in mind that as I write them, I'm looking for a pair that I add or subtract together to make 6. Okay, so 2 times 20, can't add or subtract to make 6. 4 times 10, I can add or subtract 4 and 10 together to make 6. So I know I have my answers. So now the question is it plus 10 and minus 4? Or is it plus 4 and minus 10? Well, I have a minus 6. So that means it has to be plus 4 and minus 10 because that's minus 6. So I get n plus 4. I get n minus 10, and there was no leading coefficient, so I'm done, and I've factored number 10. Okay, moving it over to factor number 11 out, oh wait, don't have to move it over. Number 11's on the bottom here. Okay, so now I'm going to factor number 11. Well, I have a leading coefficient in number 11. So the first thing I do is I get rid of it. Now when I get rid of it, I have to multiply it by my last term, my c term there. That creates an easier trinomial to factor. So I have b squared minus 1b, I don't have to write the 1, it's implied, but it's a minus 1, minus 5 times 4, so that's 20. Okay, so now I'm going to factor this trinomial. Trinomials always factor into 2 pairs of binomials if they can be factored. This is a minus minus trinomial, so my factors are going to be a plus and a minus. The first term in each one of my factors is going to be b and b. B times b is b squared. And then I take my last term here, which is 20. Whoops, the lights just went out. Power's not out. Don't worry. We'll finish this. And I take 20. I write the factors of 20, or the pairs of numbers that multiply to make 20. 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 5 and 4. One of these is my answer. Which one can I add or subtract together to make my -1? Well, it has to be 5 and 4. So now the question is it plus 5 and minus 4, or is it plus 4 and minus 5? Has to be plus 4 and minus 5 because that is -1, which is what I want right there. So then I know my factors are b plus 4 and b minus 5. Once again, I'm not completed yet though because I had a leading number. I multiplied by 4. So now I have to make up for that and I have to divide both the numbers by 4. Okay? So when I do that, my first parentheses, 4 divided by 4 makes 1. So my first parentheses becomes b plus 1. My second parentheses, 4 does not divide into 5. So I take that number on the bottom and I move it up in front of the b. So I get 4b minus 5 and b plus 1 as my factors. Okay, number 12, r squared minus 12r plus 27. Okay, so there's no leading number, so I can go straight into factoring this trinomial. Okay, it is a minus plus. So when you have a minus plus trinomial, that means you're going to get a minus minus in your factors. Okay, the first term in each factor is going to be r and r, and then I'm going to take my last number here, 27, and I'm going to write the pairs of numbers that make 27. There's only two. 1 and 27 and 9 and 3. Which one of those pairs can be added or subtracted together to make a 12? Well, it has to be 9 and 3. And they're both minus, so that means I'm going to get a minus 9 and a minus 3. Okay, now just a point of interest, or clarification, if you wrote the answer like this, r minus 3, r minus 9, that would be the same answer. Okay, so the order that you put the parentheses in doesn't matter, and the reason is because the multiplication property, by the multiplication property, it is reflexive. Okay, so we could flip the values around. Okay, number 13. 13, I have a leading coefficient of 6. There we go, now you can see it. So I'm going to take my leading number, which is 6, and I'm going to get rid of it and the leading, and I'm going to put it at the end. The reason why I do that is because this helps me create a trinomial that is a lot easier to factor. Okay, so 36 times 6 is 216. Now this one probably isn't the easiest one to do in the world, but I have a calculator, so I'll be able to factor it out. So I have a plus minus trinomial, so my factors are going to be plus and minus. My leading term in each factor is going to be x and x, and now I'm going to take my last term, 216, and I'm going to have to find a pair of numbers that multiply to make 16, like 1 and 216, or 2 and 108, but the pair has to add or subtract to make positive 19. Okay, so I just got to keep going here until I find one. So I'm going to use my calculator. So I'm going to go 216 divided by 3, so I get 3 and 72, or 72 and 3. Well, those can't be added or subtracted to make 19, so I got to keep going. 216 divided by 4, 4 and 54. Okay, that's not it, because those pairs don't make 19. 216 divided by 5 doesn't come out evenly, so 5 is not a factor. 216 divided by 6, so I get 36 and 6. I'll put it over here. Okay, can I get 19 out of those? No. Okay, so then I got to try 216 divided by 7. Okay, that's not a factor. 216 divided by 8. So I get 8 and 27, or 27 and 8. Okay, there it is, right there. I could put 27 and 8 together to make 19 by adding or subtracting, in this case subtracting. So now the question is it going to be plus 27 and minus 8, or is it going to be plus 8 and minus 27? Well, it has to be this one, because that makes plus 19, is what I have here. So I get an x plus 27, and then I get an x minus 8. Okay, now I have to divide each of those numbers by my leading number, which was a 6. So I'm going to divide each number by 6. Okay, so when I divide, does 6 go into 27? The answer is no. But this one brings up a good point. Okay, I'm always trying to make my answer as simple as possible. All right, so I could actually reduce 27 over 6. If I divided each by 3, this becomes 9 over 2. Okay, so I want to reduce if I can, even if you can't divide. Now, when I do that, that turns my first factor into 2x plus 9. Okay, then I get to my second factor. Well, 6 does not divide into 8, but I could reduce this to 4 over 3. So that turns my second factor into 3x minus 4. So these would be my factors for my problem. Let's do a quick check, see if we did it right. Take the first terms. Is 2x times 3x 6x squared? Yeah, it is. Take these terms. Is 9 times 4 36? Yeah, it is. So we have a pretty good sense of that we did it correctly. Okay? Number 14, there is no leading coefficient, so I could go straight into my factors. Now it's a minus minus. So what does a minus minus factor into? A plus and a minus. My first term is going to be v and v. And to find my numerals for my factors, I take my c value, my last term, and I'm going to write the pairs of numbers that multiply to make 36. 2 times 18, 3 times 12, 4 times 9, okay? And I could even do 6 times 6 if I wanted to. But 4 and 9 are my answers. Why 4 and 9? Well, I could add these or subtract them to turn it into 5. So I know that's it. Now I have a plus and a minus. So now the question is it going to be plus 9 minus 4? Or is it going to be plus 4 minus 9? Well, look here. I have a minus 5. So it has to be plus 4 minus 9 because that gives me my minus 5 that I need. So I know my factors are v plus 4, v minus 9. There was no leading number, no leading coefficient, so I don't have to divide. I'm done. There's my factors. Okay, number 17, I have a leading coefficient of 7, so I'm going to get rid of it, and I'm going to multiply it by my last term, which is 30. That creates an easier trinomial to factor. N squared plus 29n minus 30 times 7 is 210. Okay, so now I'm ready to factor this trinomial. I draw my two parentheses. These are going to be my two factors. This is a plus minus trinomial factors into a plus and a minus. My first terms are n and n. Then I take my last term, 210, and I'm going to write down all the pairs of numbers that multiply to make 210. And I feel like I did that earlier someplace, maybe not. Oh yeah, right there. So I have all my factors of 210. You can refer to that, but I'll write them out. 1 times 210, 2 times 105, 3 times 70, 4 times, let's see, what was 4? It was 4, no, it wasn't 4. So it'd be 5 times 42. Can any of these be added or subtracted together to make 29 yet? Nope. So I got to keep going. How about 6? So I would go 210 divided by 6. 6 and 35, there it is. Okay, I could add or subtract 6 and 35 together to make 29. All right, so now the question is, what is it? I have a plus and a minus. Is it plus 35 minus 6? Or is it plus 6 minus 35? Has to be this one, because this one is plus 29, which you see we have the plus 29. So I have a plus 35, and then I have a minus 6. Okay, now I have to divide by my leading coefficient. So I'm going to divide by 7. That turns my first parentheses into n plus 5. It actually divides out. My second parentheses does not divide out, so I take the number on the bottom, I move it up, so my second parentheses turns in, my second factor turns into 7n minus 6. There we go for number 15. Okay, moving on, we got number 16, 9b squared minus 65b plus 14. So I have my leading number of 9, my leading coefficient of 9, so I have to get rid of it, and I'm going to multiply it by the in number, which is 14. That gives me a trinomial that's a little bit easier to factor. B squared minus 65b plus 14 times 9. So that would be, let's see, 14 times 9 is 126. Okay? So now I can factor this trinomial. A little bit easier. I have to do a little bit less math. It is a minus plus trinomial. So when I have a minus plus trinomial, I know my factors are minus minus. And my first terms are b and b. Okay, now I take my last number, 126, and I have to find the pairs of numbers that multiply to make 126, but at the same time they're going to have to add or subtract to make 65. So I'm going to just start making my list and see what happens. Can I get 65 by adding or subtracting 2 and 63? No. Okay, how about 3 and 42? Can I get 65 out of that? No. Okay, so now I'm going to use my calculator to help me out. How about 126 divided by 4? Not a factor. 126 divided by 5? Not a factor. 126 divided by 7? That's a factor. That's 7 and 18. Okay, now, hopefully you were screaming at me in the video because I got my pair. I missed it. It was 2 and 63. 2 and 63, I could put those together to make 65. And they're both minus. So I'm going to go minus 2, minus 63. Okay? But now I have to divide by my leading number, which is 9. Okay? So, first parentheses cannot be divided, so I take the number on the denominator, I move it up. So my first factor is 9b minus 2. My second factor can be divided, so my second factor is b minus 7. So there's my factors for number 16. Okay, hopefully this is starting to make sense. We got 2 more to go in this worksheet, and then we'll stop. Okay, so I have 3p squared plus 16p plus 21. So I have a leading number, so I need to get rid of it, and I need to multiply it by the last number. That gives me an easier trinomial to factor, p squared plus 16p plus 63. Okay, so now I could factor this trinomial. It's a plus plus trinomial, so I know my factors are going to be plus plus. My first term in each factor is going to be a p and a p. So now I take my last number, 63, and I'm going to find all the pairs of numbers that multiply 63. As I'm doing it, I'm keeping in mind, is there a pair that I could add or subtract together to make 16? Okay, that's not going to work. How about 3 and 21? Nope, that's not going to work. I can't add or subtract those together to make 16. Okay, how about 9 and 7? Yep, that's it. So I know this, it's a plus 9 and a plus 7. Wrong color. Plus 9 plus 7. Okay, now I have to divide by my leading number, which was 3. Okay, if it divides, go ahead and divide it. So my first factor simplifies to p plus 3. My second factor, I don't want to divide this because that's going to be an ugly decimal. So what I do is I take the number on the denominator, I move it up in the front, and so my second factor becomes 3p plus 7. There's my factors for number 17. Last one, I have a leading coefficient of 3, so I'm going to get rid of it, and I'm going to multiply it by the number at the end. So that gives me an easier trinomial, v squared minus 28v minus 60. 20 times 3 is 60. Now I can factor this trinomial, a little bit easier. So I'm going to have my two factors. This is a minus minus trinomial, so that means my factors will be a plus and a minus. Okay, and then each first term is going to be a v and a v. To find my second terms of my factors, I take my last number, we call that the c value, 60, and I have to find a pair of numbers that multiply to make 60, but as I'm writing those pair of numbers, I'm thinking, can any of them be added or subtracted to make 28? And you can see I got it right there. So I'm done. I don't have to write any more pairs once I find it. Why? Because I could put 30 and 2 together to make 28. I could subtract them. I have a plus and a minus. So is it going to be a plus 30 and a minus 2? Or is it going to be a plus 2 and a minus 30? That's a negative 28. So it has to be the plus 2 and the negative minus 30. Okay, so that's not it. So I'm going to have v plus 2 and v minus 30. But now I have to divide by my leading coefficient, which was a 3 at the beginning. So I'm going to divide both of these by 3. 2 divided by 3, I don't want to divide that. That'll give me like some nasty looking decimal. So what I do is I take the number on the denominator and I just move it up. So my first factor becomes 3v plus 2. Okay, my second factor, those actually divide, so I just simplify that to v minus 10, and there's my factors for number 18. Okay, hopefully you enjoyed it. Use it to help you out. Finish off your work.